Okay, I am so excited. I have been looking forward to this conversation for so long. So I want to thank you, Anila, for joining us. You have a long bio, but I want to read it for the benefit of everybody who's joined us today. And thank you for joining us on this very important Zoom. Anila Ali is a dedicated Muslim faith leader and an author. She is a civil rights advocate who's committed to promoting interfaith dialogue, and I know you've done a lot of that important work. She was born in Pakistan and is also the International Religious Freedom Roundtable Chair for Pakistan and the Women's Economic Forum Gender-Based Violence Chair for Pakistan. Anila has dedicated her life to promoting reconciliation between faiths and bringing humanity together. She believes education is the most powerful tool to change lives. And she also founded and started the first Muslim women's civil rights organization after she was profiled following 9/11. Her work, peace building and doing reconciliation between Arabs and Israelis, has led the way forward for American Muslims interfaith delegation to South Asia, to Israel, to the UAE, to Morocco, to Germany, and Poland with her partners Sharaka and Combat Anti-Semitism. And her bio goes on, and we will post it when we send this around to our email list and post it on socials. But I just want to say we have so much to talk about. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on to do this Zoom with me. I'm so grateful to you. How are you doing today?
I'm
Or
doing well, thank you. Salamu alaikum and shalom and hello, good evening to everyone, whoever's watching us. And Brooke, I'm very pleased to be here. I've also watched you advocate for human rights for so many years, and I'm happy that two women have got together to talk about what is happening in our world and to see how through our discussion we can make it better and educate people.
Absolutely. Well, actually forgot to mention your most important role, which is being a mom of two children. I happen to be a mom of three boys, and I started my career very much like you did, actually, Anila, which is a focus on hate indoctrination and radicalization. I produced an award-winning documentary film called The Making of a Martyr, where I exposed the steady stream of incitement targeting innocent Muslim children, teaching them through their school textbooks, their television programs, through their media, often by their political leaders, and unfortunately, sometimes by their own family, that the greatest thing that they should aspire to is a radical jihadi version of Islam. Now, I know that you've really dedicated yourself to promoting a different type of Islam and also combating what we call Islamophobia. We're going to get into that later. But I'm wondering if we could start off on radicalization. I was actually just on a podcast with Alon Levy, and he asked me, well, what can we do about, all the radicalization in the Muslim world? And I said to him, well, it's not for us to solve. This is a change that has to come from
Yeah.
within. There
Yeah.
has to be a desire within a society not to teach their children to hate life and to love death. What is your take on this issue, and how do we solve it?
You're absolutely right. The desire to change, the desire to stop that has to come from us as Muslims. We're all crying that the Palestinian children are dying, that the Palestinian people are dying. But what are we doing about it? Are we stopping Hamas? Because they're the ones that are making sure that more Palestinians die, because we all know what Sinwar has said. I want to read what Sinwar, Hamas leader, had said. He said, "We make headlines with blood. No blood, no news." Now you tell me, why isn't the Muslim world saying that's wrong? No, we stop blood with peace because that is what God wants us to do. The religion that we are talking about, Islam, it is based on peace. If you look at the life of the Prophet, he was making, he pledges and contracts with the Bedouin tribes, with the Jewish tribes. with the other tribes, the Christian tribes. He was traveling to Syria, which was all Christian at that time, and he would love it, and they loved him. He would travel to Medina. They were the Jews. They would love him and trust him. The prophet's mother was Jewish. If our prophet was a blessing and he did not fight with the Jewish people or the Christian people, what is wrong with us? Where did we get our hate? Are we looking at Islam through the eyes of Sinwar? Because that's what he said. He said the Palestinian lives are necessary sacrifices. You know why? They want a caliphate, which is like the ISIS caliphate, which was rejected by scholars in the 12th century Islam. They had more courage than the leaders of today, Brooke. They were rejecting that very vile, violent ideology. You talk about children and how a life is sacred. The Quran, God says it clearly that you save a life. It's as if you have saved humanity. And yet, the Hamas, when they attacked the innocent Israelis, they were invoking God's name. In the name of Allah, they were killing. And we are not saying a word about that. That's a desecration of our religion. God of mercy, in the name of Allah, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. God is merciful. We have desecrated his name. And there is no leader in the Muslim world that is standing up and taking on Hamas. Let's talk about America. Do we have leadership that is, yes.
Mhm. Well, you're right. It's all about leadership. And, that's the thing about religion is that it lends itself to interpretation. And unfortunately, there are people who interpret the Quran one way, and then there's others who are more radical, who interpret it another way. And unfortunately, what we're seeing right now throughout the majority of the Middle East, and also now with the globalization of the Intifada, this more radical version come to our universities, come to our street. But it's not just infected a Muslim population. You have, this marriage of the progressive Marxist left that have embraced radical Islam. And now we have people, Americans, chanting, pro-Hamas ideology on our streets, carrying ISIS flags, justifying New Orleans murder. This radical ideology has seeped into our diversity, equity, inclusion programs, our critical race theory programs. So the question is, what is the best way really to tackle this? One of the problems that we have highlighted through our lawsuits and our advocacy is also the issue of foreign funding. The fact that Qatar, which is the second largest funder of Hamas, a designated terrorist group, is also the number one largest funder of our American education system right now, giving over $1 billion a year to our campuses. So from your position, as a Muslim woman, how do you see this de-radicalization process both happening within Muslim majority countries? And then what is your advice to those of us in the West who believe in freedom of speech, who believe in democracy, who believe in this great experiment that this wonderful country is, but at the same time are very concerned with the rise of radical Islamist married with these Marxist ideologies that are infecting our public dialogue right now?
I feel radicalization of Muslims. I wrote a white paper and I presented it to President Obama. Because after 9/11, we were seeing indicators of rising radicalization. I grew up in England and I saw the same thing. My father, who was a diplomat, he would go to the mosques, he would go to the community centers in Birmingham, and he would tell them, look, this country is great. It has given you an opportunity to educate your kids. You came in as labor force, but your next generation with education will be empowered, will be able to, climb up the social ladder, the economic ladder, and don't sit in your little, cocoons. Meet with the people that you're living with, your neighbors, get to know them, tell them who you are. It's the same thing that happened in America, that, we came to this country majority of us came here for economic opportunity. We sent our kids to schools. We wanted to live a free life and be free. But when it came to our structures, right, our beliefs, we wanted to impose them. We wanted to follow the same structure and build it here. Well, this is a democracy. Living in the West, you first have to reconcile that you're not living in a Muslim country, that you're living in a country where everyone is equal, where everyone's religion or no religion, they're all treated the same way. You don't understand how to live in a democracy, and you will come here and say, no, I want the same values that I had. It's not possible. But unfortunately, that has transferred to our young generation. What they saw 9/11. The present generation, they haven't even seen 9/11. So they don't know how we felt on that 9/11. And we said, oh my God, we are not like that. The majority of us in America at that time we loved America. We wanted to live here. We are enjoying life. But what happened? This young generation felt displaced. Here, they don't know why their family came here. They don't know where they came here from. I did. I came here because I was treated differently. I was, persecuted for being a woman. In Saudi Arabia, when I lived 25 years ago, I was persecuted for being an open-minded thinker, not, covering my hair. I came here for all of the right reasons, but the next generation is kind of, I say, the entitled generation who has been given that Kool-Aid of anti-Semitism. They are still struggling. They don't know where they come from. Parents came from Pakistan, they came from Egypt and wherever. They're saying, who am I? And then we had the progressive far left meet these young people. And then we had the MSAs on campuses. We had the MSA, it was
Muslim Student
funded, Brooke.
Association you're referring to.
Muslim Students Associations, they were funded by an organization which is America's enemy. It is the enemy of Islam, I say, because they're promoting a radical Muslim Brotherhood Islam. And I have dealt with them. I'm like a first-hand, I bear witness to their hate, because they would fund these Muslim Students Associations, and then they would bring in the radical imams from Afghanistan to preach on Fridays on these visas that we were giving to them. And that continued. Did we call out that radicalization? Oh, yes. The Qurans at that time, the interpretations of the Quran after 9/11 in the prison systems were very, they weren't even approved by the Saudis. They were being passed out. And, we got together along with a couple of other organizations. We went into these prison systems. We changed the Quran and we said, this is the one. This is the one that is not interpreted by the radicals. But we were late. A lot of these people left the prison system, got back. The organization CARE, Council on American Islamic Relations, they are well known to be in the prison system, to be in the African-American community, the marginalized community, and to pretend they care for them. They started converting people to Islam. There were so many Latinas who would come to me and say, do you know this organization? They're telling us that they're very good. They're converting some of them. Can you talk about that? Brooke, that was 15 years ago. We told law enforcement, but law enforcement and the far left and the Democratic Party, sadly, I used to be a part and parcel of the, Democratic Party. We went up to President Obama. We said, here's the white paper. Please do not include Council on American Islamic Relations. They have told us that they are all about delegitimizing Israel. We are Pakistani, majority of us. We do not really want to get into this geopolitics. We want our Muslim kids to get jobs in the government, to, go and work for NASA and build and not destroy. They are here for a different reason. And we were told, oh, it's their First Amendment. Well, hate is protected, but FBI can call them a dangerous partner. What did they call them? Inappropriate partner. No, they have evidence. They have evidence.
Because I think that you're really hitting on a good point that I would like to expand a bit for the audience. So, the Council on American Islamic Relations is actually a Muslim Brotherhood front organization and an unindicted co conspirator in a terror financing trial that, as you referenced before, the FBI was working with for way too long and only recently has disavowed them. And yet, they put themselves out there to be the representatives of the American Muslim community. They are a radical organization that routinely uses lawfare, frivolous legal actions to silence and punish those who speak out against theologically motivated terrorism, and really are responsible for marginalizing voices like yours. Now, I want to hit on this topic because it's a sensitive one, and I think really only you can help me unpack it, because you have, and I see in your bio, dedicated yourself both to exposing anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. However, the term and the sort of what I call the Islamophobia movement has gone so far as to, as we see right now in the news on Elon Musk is tweeting about it a lot. There are Pakistani child sex trafficking gangs in the UK that the police have known about but refuse to act against, with hundreds, if not thousands, of children being victimized out of fear of being called Islamophobic. You know, when I released my movie, which was about the protection of innocent Muslim children, that they deserve an education and media free of incitement to hate and violence. And for this movie, I risked my own life to expose how innocent Palestinian Muslim children are being recruited for suicide and homicide attacks. If being against child sex trafficking or being against the abuse of Muslim children for purposes of war is anti-Muslim, is Islamophobic, what then is pro-Muslim? And isn't that the bigotry of low expectations that people like Brett Stevens, continually talk about? So how, on the one hand, do you see yourself combating Islamophobia? You had a really important role. You yourself, right, were on the terror watch list after 9/11, which I find very surprising, but I think it was like a catch-all net at that
Yeah,
point.
it was my date
Um,
of birth. It was my
you
date
did.
of birth, which
Interesting. I
matched.
want to hear about that. But at the same time, recognizing how there is actually something to fear about theologically motivated terrorism. There is something called radical Islam. And we have to be able, as you are, to talk about it, to joke about it, to analyze it in order to understand it and ultimately defeat it. So, how does that play? How do you see yourself combating Islamophobia while recognizing that it's a tool perhaps being misused by groups like the Council on American Islamic Relations to silence free speech about these issues of national security?
Well, first of all, you mentioned children, and I want to make an important point, which I should have in my first answer, that I just didn't get up one day and say, I'm going to expose the truth and I'm going to do this. I actually didn't want to be called like, oh, you are speaking out against your own people. I went to Ramallah, I went to Jenin, and I went to Gaza in 2018. Why? Because I wanted to make sure that no one in my community or outside will ever point fingers and say, oh, sister, you didn't speak up for the Palestinians. So I went to Jenin. I wasn't allowed to take videos, and the whole atmosphere was very eerie. We went to a theater which was run by an Israeli, Jewish Israeli guy who was teaching the Palestinian kids there. And as I was walking on the streets, there were brand new Mercedes, brand new cars, and buildings. Like the home was one generation, two generation. They were all buildings. They had running water, they had everything. And I thought to myself, here I am thinking they were just like tents. They're living in tents. It isn't like that. So I was lied to. I didn't appreciate that. And as we were going and meeting with PLO and the leaders there, all they were doing is asking for money. And I said, do you want me to go back? I mean, you're the only people I've heard who are saying, go and ask Trump for more money for Muslims. And, you want me to do that? They said, oh, yes, sister, we need more money. Okay. Is it all about the money? As I was coming out after meeting PLO and finding that, I've been fooled. They are all really healthy, wealthy, and living pretty well. The only thing is, yeah, they are armored and standing there on the streets and patrolling. And I'm going, I see this big poster, two posters, one for a child, give us your child for jihad, $15,000 if he's under 18, 16 or 18. And the other one, your child will take you to heaven. Give us your child. If he's older, $25,000 to your family. $25,000. I mean, you are selling your children. And where in the Quran does it say that you sell your child and Allah will send the parents to heaven? Nowhere. Nowhere. And this is exactly the point where I said, I'm not going to support this jihadi version of Islam that is going around, because I am the daughter of a grandmother who was, she wrote 14 books on Islam. She was a Muslim, the first Muslim elected to Congress in India 300 years ago. There was no jihad Islam like that. Blow yourself up and kill people and take your children fast track to heaven. No. Jihad was learning to, speak the truth or lie. Should you lie to your parents? Should you lie to your boss that you're sick, but, you're not? That's jihad, doing the right thing and not doing the right, not doing the wrong. But they have perverted Islam and they have turned it into the Sayyid Qutb version, the Muslim Brotherhood, Al-Banna version that we never grew up with. So I feel that it's very important for us to understand that this kind of Islam, the perversion of my beautiful religion, has been happening, not now. It started out in the UK. People like Anjum Chaudhary, they sent it to our mosques in America, and organizations like CARE latched onto it. How did we allow them to take hold of the microphone in the mosque and say, kill all the Jews? The Jews are cursed. And
So
there
I'll
will
push
be.
back on that just to play devil's advocate, because I know, we've been having these conversations in the counterterrorism and the legal community for quite some time. And there's those of us who, some, not me, I'm not an expert in Islamic theology, I'll put it out there. But there are those who say, well, actually, this is Islam. Islam contradicts itself. You can find quotes in the Quran that do justify killing of Jews. There's the famous quote, if there's a Jew behind a rock, the rock will call out. Not sure that's the exact verse, but then there's other parts, of the Quran that say the opposite. And so is it a matter of imams, picking and choosing which parts they follow? How do you reconcile people who push back and say, actually, no, there is a version of Islam like that?
Majority of the imams that I'm speaking to these days, they understand the Quran. They know that when the Quran is not chronological. So a lot of things were said during time of war, and then there was no war, and then there was peace. So if you actually look at the intention behind every verse and look at the context that it was sent in, then you are trying to understand Islam. Now, our men are allowed to marry Jews and Christians, and yet some of the imams say, you can't be friends with Jews and Christians. You cannot eat with them. Yes, there is a verse in the Quran when the Muslims were in battle with the Christians, or in battle with the pagans, or in battle with the Jews. There was a verse saying, Allah was extremely mad at the Jewish people and the Christians at some point. But Allah in the end is the decider. And Allah has also blessed the Jews. Why aren't they talking about the verses where Allah has said, I have made the Jews superior to all my creations. You are all the children of Adam. Why don't they talk about those verses? How do they explain? They don't even want to talk about it. They don't even want to sit down with people like me, or people like Imam Hamdi and the imams who are working with us. They don't want to debate. They want to shut us down. I ask them often, Dr. Omar Suleiman, who is preaching hate in America against the Jewish people, I want him to come sit with me. I want the head of care, Nihad Awad, to come sit with me and tell me where in the Quran Allah says, go, kill them. That is jihad. Why aren't the Kashmiris doing that? Why didn't the Rohingyas do that? Why didn't the Syrian take their children and blow them up in front of each other? Why didn't the Sudanese do that? Why
So
isn't it
why
happening
is
for the
it
past 1500 years? Because that is Islam.
so how come and I don't know the answer to this question, so it is really why I'm asking you, that those who promote a more radical version of Islam, if that's what you want to call it, have been recognized as leaders of these organizations? Is it because, well, we know the Muslim Brotherhood had a plan, and the oldest terrorist group in modern history is the Muslim Brotherhood organization, and they are very well funded, and they had a plan to what I call to be the greatest subversive influence campaign this world has ever seen, and take hold, and organizations like NIAC, the National Iranian American Council, and Trita Parsi, who are arguing against the Iran deal. These are basically terrorist supporters in suits who are masquerading as CEOs and directors of 501c3 and 501c4 nonprofit organizations. And we in the West are viewing them and treating them as though they're the legitimate leadership of the Muslim community here. What would it take to dethrone them, to put people like you and your colleagues in positions of leadership, and to delegitimize their narrative, at least here in the United States of America? How have you been marginalized? How has your voice been silenced? How have you been received by your community? And really, what is stopping more moderate voices like yours from getting positions of influence, of power, and leadership? Because we shoot ourselves in the foot when we deal with care as opposed, to deal with you.
Yes, look, what happened in 2015 is an example of exactly why women like me and men like me were shut down, we're silenced, we're intimidated, we're harassed, we can't get jobs. The girl, my Muslim sister, Lori Saroya Hedri, the Pakistani girl who was on the board for CARE, and, she challenged them. She didn't sign the NDA. And, now after so many years, they almost, figuratively, okay, killed her. They wrote letters against her. She couldn't get a job. Her family
Who
was
is
not
they?
allowed to
Who,
come.
who is they in
Care,
this?
Care National. They didn't want her to come out and reveal all the evidence she has that they are linked to Hamas, that they are not only terrorist-minded, they're misogynist. They discriminate against women. The one woman who was appointed to CARE National Board many years ago, she was a Pakistani woman. Her mother dies. She goes to Pakistan, and during that time, the CARE leadership, Nihad Awad, etc., they decide that they're going to take her out. And they say, oh, you've been gone too long. So a gentleman, an Indian Muslim, Dr. Parvez, came out and said that was not right. How could you get rid of this woman? She's an amazing woman. And he realized that they were discriminating against their own people, the Muslims. They were also pretending to like the LGBTQ and, the taqiyya, which, you can lie and you can pretend that you like the white people and the gay people. They were using that concept in Islam, which most people don't know about. And that is how they got into the liberal side of America by saying, oh, we'll fight for your rights. You know what happens to, gay people in places like Gaza, Iran, Iraq, look, Afghanistan, anywhere. They're not allowed to even state that they are gay. So let alone have equal rights. Now, these organizations silenced women like me, but I'm very fortunate that I belong to, a family that has empowered me. And it was very hard when after October 7th, when they actually sent out fatwas and called my family from Pakistan to UK to Dubai and said, your sister's a sellout. A lot of my board members who were going to the local mosque, they were told, oh, you're with that sister who stood up for the Jewish people, and you can't come to the mosque until, I mean, if you're not able to go and pray in the local mosque, are you going to stand up and tell the truth? No, you're going to be intimidated unless, of course, you're made of metal. I'm made of metal now. And I've decided that I'm going to expose the truth. If that is what Allah has chosen me to do, I'm going to do that. But the good thing is that seeing me, there is a young generation that's standing up. We have to give them the voice. We have to take the microphone, take the podium away from these men who come from Syria or they come from Palestine and they have a beard and they say, I know Islam. Because really, they know the only Muslim Brotherhood Islam. And that's what they are here for 20 years. They've been using the money that is coming in from abroad. Why aren't we looking at their financials? Where is the money coming from? And hopefully now with Laurie's case, they're going to look at them. Take them the microphone away from them. I just got a call from, I was doing something with ADL supporting an anti-Semitism, some law that they're proposing. And what happened in Chicago? The proxy organizations of CARE, they told ADL that, oh, that organization is Islamophobic. We're not going to work with them. ADL should say they are our partners and we're going to be working with them. Because where were they when the Jewish people needed support? They're the ones who are planting and growing the anti-Semitism. So organizations, the Jewish organizations, other American organizations must stand up to their bullying and
Of
support
course.
the moderate Muslim voice.
What happened there? So you were to speak or you spoke at an event with the ADL and CARE came and said, don't work with you? What happened?
Yes, yes. So, a lot of times we have been told, oh, we can't work with you. I mean, the PBS, this producer from PBS was really excited about us and saying, you're the organization that we must America represents should be represented through you, American Muslim women. We're so proud of you. All of a sudden, they got harassed. CARE found out that CARE and other organizations, liberal organizations, even the National Endowment for Humanities, they
Yes.
found out that we're going to be featured because their promos had started coming and they saw that we took a stand to stand with the Israeli women against Hamas. Guess what they did? They wrote us a very nice letter saying, we get our funding from the National Endowment for Humanities, and they are expressing their concern at the stand you have taken. You tell me, who is funding them? The liberal media is also being funded by the government. Why is the government funding the liberal media when they're shutting the moderate Muslims down and empowering who? Who's going to be there instead of us? It is going to be an organization that is probably linked to CARE, that is promoting that, the Muslim Brotherhood kind of Islam. We'll keep losing these
This,
battles.
yeah, this complicity of us in the West to bowing down and bending over backwards not to offend the most radical of all Muslim organizations in America, the Council on American Islamic Relations, is extraordinarily disappointing, to say the least. Very scary, in fact. And I think it's a new world. After October the 7th, we can't have this post 9/11 mentality where we're tiptoeing around who we're going to offend. It doesn't serve us, and we can see that. I want to go back a little bit to the issue of civil rights, because you've dedicated yourself to Muslim civil rights. You've also dedicated yourself to speaking out for the Jewish state. And what we see happening now is an incredibly worrying trend of rising anti-Semitism tied to radicalization in this country. And I'm about to publish an op-ed about how we can't just deal with Jew hatred, that Jew hatred stems from a larger problem of domestic radicalization that's anti-American. that's anti-women's rights, that's anti-free speech, and it has to be dealt with altogether. And so I was wondering, as you see what's happening to Jewish students on campus, how October the 7th is being justified, or it's being denied, or it's called, resistance by any means necessary, resistance to occupation, and all of these uh, perverted philosophies are being spread on our campus, which is basically leading to discrimination against Jews, Jewish students getting beaten up on campus. My clients, Max and Michael at DePaul University, were beaten. Max was left with a concussion on his head, while he was left with a concussion and brain damage, while students who witnessed his brutal beating told him, "You deserve what you got because you're a Zionist, because you're pro-Israel." This has infected our campuses. It's infected, as you said, our media. It's infected some of our politicians. And it's resulted in this alarming rise of Jew hatred and unlawful anti-Jewish discrimination, the likes of which I really didn't think I would ever see in this great country, being the grandchild of Holocaust survivors. So, what is your advice to the Jewish community? How do we build allyship with your community and work to enforcing the civil rights of the Jewish community here and now, which, by the way, is separate and apart from any conflict in the Middle East? And I always say that, the so-called Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which is a misnomer. There's no conflict between Israelis and Palestinian Muslims. There's a proxy war funded by Iran that's meant to reestablish the caliphate against the West, and they see Israel as the outpost of America in the Middle East. And so, how do we go about enforcing the civil rights of the Jewish community in America and partnering with your community to do so?
There are many organizations, Brooke, that are like ours, but they need to be uplifted, and we are doing that. With our fellowship program, we are building leaders in the communities, grassroots communities, helping them build their organizations, like the Muslim Women Speakers. Before October 7th, my colleague Soraya had 10 women. Now she has 21 women, Egyptian women, Iranian women. We are building this movement from the ground up. That's where we need to work. We know that the desire to fight anti-Semitism at the top, especially on the left, is not there. But the desire is there in us. At the bottom, we are the people that are seeing that today what is anti-Semitism can easily turn into Islamophobia. And that's my message to my Muslim community: building leadership, responsible building leadership. But to the Jewish community and to the larger American community, I say, choose your allies. Look at them. Who are they? Don't just take a token representation of Muslims. Take the right representation, one that is going to empower the Muslim community, bring out the moderates, not one that is going to promote that victimhood that we are all being made to feel in our mosques. Majority of the mosques are spewing out, oh, the poor Palestinians, poor. Empower them with peace. If you care about the Palestinians, empower them with peace. Sit down with the Israelis, talk to each other. They're not doing that. So very important to foster inclusive dialogue and not have token representation. Also, mainstream our politicians, our other organizations like ADL, AJC, they should not be afraid of being called Islamophobes. Look at me. I'm a Muslim woman and I'm standing here. I've been beaten down. I've lost majority of my one side of my family. My other side doesn't want to talk to me. From the millennials in that part of my family to the seniors, they all are like, you stood with America and Israel, and it's always America and Israel. That's my country. I am going to stand with America, and I'm going to speak the truth. That is my Islamic
What are
upbringing.
the most effective messages that you've been able to develop and use that counter this narrative. The Jews are the enemy, Israel is the enemy. And I ask this because we have a messaging problem. You know, everybody asks themselves, why does Israel have such bad PR? I think it's the wrong question, but that's for another day. The lies coming out, how Israel goes above and beyond what is required by the laws of armed conflict, and yet it is seen as the aggressor. It is, you know, Israeli officials are charged with war crimes, and this perverted lawfare narrative is then used to justify targeting Jews on campus or to justify more extreme measures. What are the most effective messages that you've been able to use in the Muslim community against this untrue, radical narrative?
We've been using the Abraham Accords. Look, when we pray as Muslims, Brooke, we say the Durood Ibrahimi, the verse of Prophet Abraham. And in that verse, which I can guarantee like 80% of Muslims do not even know what they're saying. But the verse we all know who have studied Islam, that we are asking Allah to bless Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his family, just like he blessed Prophet Abraham, peace be upon him, and his family. We say that at least 5 times a day, at least. But do we know what it is? Those are the kinds of verses we need to, as Muslims, start using. And that is what our women are doing. We are looking at our verses and we're saying, no, let's talk about it. And we're telling the people who think that, you know, we can talk to us. Where is the verse that is telling you to hate Jews and Christians? Let us sit and debate. Because if that were the case, that would have been happening for 1,500 years. This hate, especially in the South Asian world, the anti-Semitism has been taught to us by the Wahhabi dollars that were going into our mosques in Indonesia and Malaysia and Pakistan, Bangladesh, Afghanistan. Then they just exploded these mosques. And now you have this kind of radicalization. And it doesn't help, Brooke, to have Muslim leaders in Congress who have started the most vile anti-Semitism. We thought Rashida Tlaib would be the one to bring Jews and Muslims together and say, I want peace for my Palestinian brothers and sisters. I don't want to keep them in a perpetual state of eternal victimhood and conflict. But the only people who benefit from that is Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas, Hezbollah. Hezbollah is kind of weakened, but we still have Muslim Brotherhood. It is quite pervasive in in our mosques, in the trade unions that we have, the campuses, the Muslim Students Associations there, in people's minds. We have to de-radicalize our leftists as well. And then we have to tell the media, why are you coming and asking us? You know that there were journalists who came and said, you went to Israel after the kibbutz, to the kibbutz after October 7th. And did you really see that the women were raped?
It's remarkable to me that the Muslim Brotherhood is a designated terrorist organization in the UAE and in other countries, and yet we allow them to operate freely within our borders when we know exactly who they are. It's just mind-blowing.
Yes.
So I forgot to mention that if anybody wants to ask a question, if they could please type it in the Q&A. I noticed that somebody, Allison, wrote, what organization is Anila Ali part of, and how can we support her and the organization amplify her voice and their message? If you can just quickly tell people just the mission of your organization and where it exists on social media and how people can support you. I will say this, that I really look forward to both the Lawfare Project and the End Jew Hatred Movement working together with you, because I think the relationship has to be symbiotic. The fact that you're being canceled is unacceptable. And I think that in order for us to demand allyship, we also have to be good allies to our moderate Muslim friends. And if that ever happens again, you will be able to rely on us, on the End Jew Hatred Movement, on the Lawfare Project to ensure that 10 times the amount of complaints and false protestations of Islamophobia that are meant to silence you are then going to be countered with an overwhelming voice of support. And I'm very sorry to learn that a organization like the ADL would even consider canceling you. So I apologize for that. But again, the
Yes.
allyship goes both ways. So tell us more about your organization, how we can find you, and what your Instagram handle is, and what the mission is. And also, what is the most important initiative that you're working on right now that you need support for?
First of all, we are building responsible Muslim leaders in our community, men and women, who believe in respect for all, religious freedom for all, who believe that today our children are not only becoming anti-American, they're becoming anti-Semitic. And those are both against the values of Islam. You know, Islam is all about modernity, embracing it. I mean, just look back at the, you know, the way we lived in the golden era of Islam, Andalusia. And we were working the best when we were working with Christians and Jews. We were thriving. We were reading and writing and understanding each other. But today, somebody has divided us. And not only that, we are very concerned about our children. We, you know, I'll tell you later about this, the interns that I had who, you know, said the most violent things to us because they were told that in the groups and the MSAs that they went to, Johns Hopkins University. And, you know, I was like, where did you pick it up from? I go to the website. It is Hamas's, you know, their talking points. And I called her. I said, Fatima, that is not true. That's not Islam. You were born in a better household. This is a Muslim Brotherhood Hamas household. What are you doing? That we have to save our children. So yes, we need to partner together. The Jewish community stood with us after 9/11. We have not been there for them. But, you know, God knows that there is something that, you know, when you tell the truth, God helps you. So American Muslim Multi-Faith Women's Empowerment Council is the only organization in the Muslim community that signed on to the Abraham Accords, and we never turned back our backs on that. And we said we believe in this sacred covenant between Muslims and Jews, and we will make sure that we travel to the different Muslim countries like Morocco, Bahrain, UAE, and you know, Pakistan. Many Pakistanis have changed their minds and they have traveled, that we are in the end going to make sure that, you know, we stop the war by bringing Arabs and Israelis together to find a political solution. You know, this is not a war between religions. This can be easily achieved if we just look at the life of the Prophet and understand how he used to sign contracts with the Jews and the Christians. That's what we want our children to see. So yes, please follow us on our platforms. We are on Instagram. AMWEC is the short name, AMMWEC. Of course, follow me and then you'll see my organization. On Twitter, promote us. Anytime that you see there is only, you know, there's a male version, a predominantly Islamist version on TV, please write to Jake Tapper, write to CNN, write to all the, you know, centrist media that continue to call on CARE, organization that has been deemed inappropriate by the FBI. And we all know they have links. And promote Laurie's story. You know, this is the Muslim Me Too Coalition. Empower us by following us, promoting us. And if you have the ability to donate to our organization, help us build these Muslim leaders. The Imam from Boston who went to the March of the Living and he spoke out. We did a whole, we prayed at the Auschwitz with an Imam from New York. There are men who are following us. And yes, I do believe, Brooke, if we stand together, no one dare cancel us. So we need more allyship. We need you guys to come stand with us.
Well, I appreciate that. And we need you to come stand with us. I know that we're going to have a very deep partnership. We would love to bring you to campuses. The End Jew Hatred movement has a robust campus fellowship program. But I also wanted to ask one more thing before we close out. I see that you're also in the process of producing a documentary right now that's highlighting the stories of Christians whose homes and churches were burnt by Muslim moms in Pakistan. Can you tell us a little bit about this documentary, when you think it would be available, what motivated you to do it, and if you've gotten any pushback on that piece as well?
You know, sometimes I think about it and I think how amazing it is that majority of the Muslim world is in, it's in Pakistan, it's in Indonesia, and it's in Bangladesh, Indian Muslims. Once upon a time, we were all living together. And at that time, we were told that the Jews and the Christians are Ahle Kitab, people of the book, and that our men are allowed to marry them. My uncle was, his nikah was took place, was performed by Maulana Maududi, who actually became Islamist later, but he was at that time a most, very progressive imam in Pakistan. And he said, no one has to convert. My uncle was marrying. He said, no, nobody has to convert to Islam because they're people of the book. I went to a Catholic school in Pakistan. Today, who I am is because the Catholic nurses, nuns, and all the educational staff there who were Christians, they taught me, and they taught all the physicians, all the engineers that you see, in the post 1947 India. All of our, the Indian physicians, the Pakistani physicians, we went to Catholic schools. And those are our educators. And today we have turned a blind eye to their persecution. And I cannot do that as the leader of the religious freedom movement in Pakistan. And very secretly, I went to Pakistan because I had a lot of fatwas from the Iranian regime, Hamas, Tehrik-e-Taliban. So secretly we went, and I was there with a journalist who heard the stories of the pastors in Pakistan. And they were so heartbreaking and heart-wrenching that we said, we cannot, I can't do anything unless I do something about this. And once I have, then I can, I'll be happy. I'll meet my Lord and say I did everything to speak up for Christians, Jews, Hindus, Muslims, everybody. And we, thank God that the journalist who's actually probably going to get fatwas, he has produced a beautiful documentary, documenting the stories of these Pakistanis who say, we don't want to go for asylum to America and the West. This is our Pakistan. We are Pakistanis. We're going to live here. And everyone has to speak for us because Pakistan was just not created for the Muslims. Quaid-e-Azam, the founder, and my family, who were all founding fathers of Pakistan, they were serving the Christian community, the Sikh community. They said, the churches and the temples in Pakistan are now open. Pray as you please. What's happened? And I know that it was Talibanization. I know it was the Wahhabi dollars that changed it because I'm eyewitness. I bear witness to all of that. So at least I can say to my Christian brothers and sisters, we talked about blasphemy. That was, a word that was not even being used. I would probably be killed if I used it. But I said, we're going to do this. If we can't do it being American Muslim leaders, then who's going to do it? Nobody.
So I want to round out on that point because you are a remarkable person. You stand for truth and moral clarity, and you have an incredible amount of courage. You referenced before, but I do want to emphasize more. There's a serious amount of intimidation, of physical threats of violence, God forbid, and other types of pressure tactics that are used against people like you. And I guess my question is, where do you find your strength? What is it in you that has lit this spark where you have dedicated yourself to this mission? Because you certainly don't have to, but you're doing it because you have a love for humanity. And you mentioned earlier your parents and your family. And I'm wondering if we can round out and conclude where you find your
I look back.
your courage. Can you hear me? Anila, are you there?
Yes, Brooke,
Where do you find it?
I look back. I look back at my grandparents. They built Pakistan. My father was a young youth leader of the Muslim, the Pakistan, it was the Muslim League of India at that time. He was a youth leader, and they built a Pakistan. They came and they served the minorities. They believed in serving people because one of the biggest tenets of Islam is hukukul ibad. If your neighbor, and it's not a Muslim neighbor, if your neighbor is hungry, you
Oh, we lost Anila for a minute because of perhaps the internet connection. So let's wait till she's able to come back. Larkin, if you wouldn't mind messaging her. Unfortunately, she froze. Well, oh, okay. Well, listen, I just, want to express to everyone a big thank you for joining us today. And we will follow up. I see some of the questions have been answered in terms of uh, what Anila does. I saw that Soraya was kind enough to post that they're looking for opportunities to speak. And if anybody here has the ability to invite Anila or to invite any of the Muslim women speakers into their home, or to the schools that your children go to, or even to other Jewish organizations. I mean, it really saddens me to hear that allegedly she was canceled. Here you go. We're back here, Anila. So you were telling me where your strength comes from, and you were talking about your grandparents and really the family values that you had to help your neighbor, to help the other. Please continue.
Yes, and my grandmother used to tell me stories every morning as a little girl. I used to sit there and wait for my school bus, and she would tell me stories from the Quran about Prophet Moses, Prophet David, Prophet Noah, Prophet Adam, Prophet Jesus. So how do you think that I would turn out? I would turn out to be somebody like me. So I feel like I'm really fortunate that my grandmother told me those stories. So I have always seen humankind as children of Adam. And that's what she used to tell me. As I saw my father also serving Muslims and telling them Islam is all about modernity. It is not, for women, it's not blind subservience to man. God has given women rights, equal rights. And he would always tell me, one thing he told me when I was persecuted by CARE in California, and they were just harassing me everywhere I was going after I had spoken out against extremism and Islamism at the White House. My father said, look, if you believe that what you're doing, Anila, is for the good of your Muslim community, for your community's future posterity, then don't worry. The path might be difficult and lonely, but God will always know that He's going to be there watching you. So take that difficult path. So I have, luckily, I had a father who taught me to be a leader and never to cower and never to be afraid of challenges, that I was able to rebuild Amwec after, the harassment that we face internationally, to bring all these Muslim leaders, to bring Muslim women speakers with Soraya from 10 to 21 speakers, to empower the Egyptian girls, the Syrian girls who are speaking out, who are, and the Christians and the Muslims, and to also understand that just because you've had a conflict in the past, India and Pakistan, my father never taught me to hate Hindus, neither did my grandmother. They said, what happened in the past. We must move on if we want to live in the future for our children to have a better future. We cannot, keep them in this state of conflict and hatred, because hatred begets hatred. And thank God that I was never taught to hate Hindus, because, the moment this Middle East conflict is solved, I want to start on India and Pakistan. And I know that we can do it. We have more of a chance of doing that as soon as the first conflict in the Middle East is over and there's reconciliation there. But, this Islam is all about peace. Are you living a peace? Are you being a blessing to mankind, or you are being a curse? Because right now, what I see, Hamas is a curse on Islam. These terrorists are a curse on Muslims. And you know who's the biggest loser? Who are the people that they are killing the most? Muslims. And the moment we realize that as young people on campuses, the moment we see we are so much better off standing with the faith communities and speaking the truth, having that moral clarity that we are going to succeed as Muslims, we'll be stronger in our faith. And a lot of our children who are looking and saying, I don't like religion, they'll come back to us and say, okay, Mom, you're right.
Well,
Yes,
we
our
would like
religion is all about peace because we have that problem.
we would like very much to bring you to campuses across this country and in Canada. It would really be our honor. And as the founder of the End Jew Hatred movement, people always ask me, well, how are you going to end Jew hatred? It's been around for centuries. You can't get rid of anti-Semitism. And to that, I always reply, well, yeah, hatred is an emotion. Everybody's born with hatred. We're not going to get rid of the emotion of hatred, but Jew hatred is taught. No child is born hating Jews. And it comes back to who you are, who I am, how we breed peace. It's through family values. And you can tell what a society is going to look like 10, 15 years in the future and the prospects for peace if you look at what they're teaching their 5, 6, 7, 8-year-olds in school. Everything is about the hate indoctrination, the radical indoctrination we're seeing both in the Palestinian context and unfortunately now on our college campuses. So I want to thank you very much for joining us today. It's really been an honor, and I know this is just the beginning of a deep and very impactful partnership. And I just want to emphasize one more time, if you go to womenspeakers.com, it's also posted in the Q&A, you will see a list of speakers that you can bring to your home, to campuses, that if we can push for more people like Anila to be speaking at Jewish events, to have interfaith events, I think that we have a chance to bridge this gap and counter radicalization with a narrative that is more fruitful and healthy for our society. We have no choice. Now is the time to do it. Forget political correctness. We all have to stand by you and your organization. Thank you so much, Anila, for joining us tonight. And thank you, everyone who came to listen.
Thank you so much, Brooke. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
Take care. We're going to close it out. Be well, everyone.